What happens when a billionaire and a flight attendant clash mid-air? You won't believe the shocking twist that follows. A story of power, revenge, and a slap heard around the world. But this isn't just another tale of an angry passenger and a frustrated worker. This is the story of how one small action on a flight led to a deadly game of retaliation and unforeseen consequences that no one could have predicted. In today's video, you'll learn exactly how an unexpected slap from a flight attendant changed everything for a billionaire, and how his revenge backfired in a way that shocked everyone involved. We'll dive deep into the events that led up to this infamous clash, uncovering lesser-known facts you won't hear anywhere else, and revealing the shocking details of what happened after the slap. Plus, we'll explore the twists and turns that followed as both sides fought for control and how the story ended in a way you won't see coming. So stick around until the end, because you're about to witness a story of power, pride, and the unpredictable outcomes of a single moment. Welcome to Channel Name Your Go-To Place for the most intriguing and jaw-dropping stories from the world of real life. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. Let's dive right in. The billionaire was a type of man who expected the world to bend to his will. Known for his vast fortune and lavish lifestyle, he surrounded himself with luxury at every turn. His private jet, his penthouse, his yacht, all symbols of a life most could only dream of. To him, money meant power, and with power came the right to demand whatever he wanted. On this particular flight, he was just another one of the elite passengers expecting nothing less than perfection from the crew. Across from him, the flight attendant was calm and professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone who had spent years in the skies. She'd seen it all, from difficult passengers to mechanical issues, and she handled each situation with grace. This flight, like every other, was just part of her job. But this time, things were different. As the flight took off and the cabin settled into its usual routine, tensions slowly began to rise. The billionaire was already showing signs of impatience. He'd requested a special meal, a rare drink, and a seat adjustment, all before the plane had even left the ground. Little things, but things that set him apart from the other passengers who were content with the standard services. The crew had already been told to cater to his every whim, but the more they tried to meet his demands, the more his attitude soured. As the hours went on, the requests became more absurd. A specific brand of champagne that wasn't stocked on the plane, a preferred type of pillow, even adjusting the temperature of the cabin just to his liking. Each time a crew member would explain that what he wanted wasn't available, his frustration grew. His tone grew sharper, his words more condescending. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was someone used to being in control, and now he expected everyone around him to bend to that control, no matter the cost. It wasn't long before the flight attendant began to notice how his behavior was affecting the rest of the crew. They were doing their best to keep things running smoothly, but it was becoming clear that nothing would be enough for him. And it wasn't just his high demands, it was the way he spoke to them, as though they were invisible, as though they didn't matter at all. As the flight continued, the atmosphere became increasingly tense. The flight attendant tried to stay calm, tried to keep things professional, but with every rude request, every snide comment, the situation was building to a breaking point, one that no one could have predicted. It wasn't the first time the billionaire had made a ridiculous demand, but this time, something in the flight attendant snapped. She had already spent the last few hours gracefully handling his impossible requests, trying her best to keep the peace. But this time, as he raised his voice again, this time demanding a special dessert that wasn't even on the menu, she felt the weight of every frustration she had been holding in. When she calmly told him that the dessert was unavailable, he shot her a look of disdain, muttering something about how it was her job to make sure things like this were provided. He didn't even seem to consider that she was doing everything she could, that she was already stretched thin, trying to keep things running smoothly. Instead, he made a pointed comment about how people like her were never good enough to satisfy his needs. That was the tipping point. For a moment, she stood there, biting her tongue, trying to remain professional. But then, something inside her just broke. In a voice that was quieter, but sharp with frustration, she told him off. "You don't get to treat me like this. You may be a billionaire, but you're not the only one on this plane. We're all human here." She wasn't sure what she expected, but it wasn't what happened next. Instead of backing down, the billionaire only smirked, clearly unbothered by her words. He leaned back in his seat, arrogantly dismissing her, as though she had just been a minor inconvenience. It was as if he had no respect for her at all, no regard for the effort she'd put in, no understanding of the power dynamics at play. Instead of diffusing the situation, he escalated it, mocking her, saying that she was just another worker who was lucky to be in his presence. The flight attendant could feel her blood boiling. Her heart raced. Every part of her professional composure crumbled, and in a split second, she did something she had never imagined she would do. She slapped him. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. No one had expected it, not the passengers, not the crew, and certainly not the billionaire himself. It was a single, sharp moment of defiance, a reaction that no one saw coming. The billionaire's face went pale, a mix of disbelief and shock crossing his features. For a split second, everything seemed to stop. And then, just as quickly, the tension in the air was palpable. The flight attendant stood there, her hand trembling slightly, her chest rising and falling with every breath. The slap hadn't just been a physical action, it was a symbolic breaking point. It was the moment when she finally stood up for herself, when her dignity was no longer up for negotiation. The slap had stunned everyone into silence, but the billionaire's shock was short-lived. His face quickly transformed into a mask of fury. He wasn't a man accustomed to being disrespected, especially not in front of others, and this was something he couldn't just let slide. As soon as the flight had landed, he wasted no time in making his feelings known. He immediately contacted the airline, using his influence to escalate the situation. With a few well-placed calls, he ensured that his complaint would be taken seriously. His wealth and status were powerful tools, and he knew how to wield them. The flight attendant, he claimed, had assaulted him in a public setting, and he demanded immediate action. His words carried weight, and soon, the airline's top brass was scrambling to deal with the situation. He didn't stop there. The billionaire had connections everywhere, from the media to high-profile lawyers, and he wasn't afraid to use them. Behind closed doors, he made it clear that he wanted the flight attendant punished, and he wanted her to pay for the embarrassment he'd suffered. He implied that her actions were not only a personal attack on him, but also a threat to the airline's reputation. Meanwhile, the flight attendant had no idea what was coming. She returned to work, thinking that the worst was behind her, but soon she began to feel the weight of the billionaire's wrath. The airline started putting pressure on her. Her superiors, once supportive, now seemed distant. The normally calm environment of her job turned into a series of tense meetings and whispered conversations. She was told that an investigation was underway. The billionaire's complaint was taken seriously, and she was put on indefinite leave while the airline decided how to handle the situation. At first, she thought it might be a temporary issue, something that would blow over once the media attention faded. But as the days went by, she realized that this was far from over. The public fallout was swift and unforgiving. News outlets picked up the story, painting her as the villain, an employee who had assaulted a respected billionaire. Social media buzzed with outrage, with many taking the billionaire's side, condemning her for what they saw as an unprofessional act. The pressure mounted. Soon, The flight attendant was dealing with more than just the media. The airline was considering disciplinary action, with rumors circulating that she might be fired. Worse still, she began hearing whispers that she could be blacklisted from working with other airlines, her career in jeopardy because of one moment of defiance. The weight of the billionaire's revenge had turned her life upside down, and she was beginning to feel the full impact of what he had set in motion. She had no choice but to face the storm head-on, but the consequences she now faced were far greater than she had ever anticipated. But here's where the story takes a shocking turn. The flight attendant had been pushed to her limits, but she wasn't going to back down. While the billionaire used his wealth and influence to make her life miserable, she had something he didn't support. She had built a strong network over the years, not just with her colleagues, but with passengers who had seen her professionalism and dedication. Many of them were already reaching out, sharing their own stories of her kindness and hard work during flights. Instead of remaining silent, she decided to fight back. She reached out to her colleagues, people who understood what it meant to be in her shoes. Together, they rallied in her defense. Word spread, and soon her story began to gain traction, not just within the airline, but in the media as well. She contacted her own legal team, determined to clear her name. At the same time, the billionaire's actions began to have unintended consequences. The more he pushed for retribution, the more his arrogance became apparent. The public wasn't as sympathetic as he had hoped. People began to question his entitlement, his behavior, and whether he was using his power to punish someone for a simple act of self-defense. His complaints, once heard only by the airline's executives, were now a point of ridicule. What began as a tale of a billionaire seeking revenge had now turned into a story of public humiliation. News outlets started digging deeper, exposing not just his demands, but his history of rude behavior towards staff, employees, and even other passengers. People began sharing their own encounters with the billionaire, revealing a pattern of entitled behavior that made the public view him in a far different light. Sympathy, once firmly on the side of the billionaire, slowly began to shift. The flight attendant, a woman who had stood up for herself in the face of extreme pressure, became the symbol of everyday workers standing up against mistreatment. Social media, once filled with posts condemning her, was now flooded with messages of support. Hashtags with her name trended, calling for justice, while the billionaire was being increasingly labeled as a villain. The backlash reached a boiling point. Pressure mounted from all sides. The airline, caught between two opposing forces, found itself forced to reevaluate its position. The billionaire's influence, while powerful, could no longer protect him from the tidal wave of public opinion. The story, once about a single slap, had become a symbol of the broader issues of class, power, and respect. In the end, the billionaire's plan backfired. His attempt at revenge had cost him more than he could ever have imagined. His reputation was in tatters, and with it, the illusion of invincibility he had once enjoyed. He faced not only public backlash, but potential business fallout. Investors, colleagues, and partners began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone who had fallen so far from grace. Meanwhile, the flight attendant's reputation was restored, and then some. What had been a devastating moment in her career became a turning point. Her courage and resolve had earned her a level of respect that couldn't be easily undone. The tables had turned, and now it was the billionaire who was fighting to salvage his image. This story shows that even the richest and most powerful can be brought down by their own sense of entitlement. No matter how much wealth or influence someone has, they are not immune to the consequences of treating others with disrespect. It's a reminder that respect goes both ways. No one should be above treating others with dignity. In the end, the flight attendant's bravery proved that standing up for yourself can lead to unexpected victories. Her courage not only turned the tables, but also send a powerful message that self-respect can overcome even the most daunting challenges. If you enjoyed this video and found the story inspiring, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to channel name for more incredible stories. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Please note that this story is a work of fiction and is not based on real events. Any similarities to actual people or incidents are purely coincidental. This narrative was created for entertainment purposes and is meant to engage and inspire through storytelling.